All right, everybody. Welcome to the Joe Kilgallon Podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode, but before I get into it, I got to thank all of my listeners. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much. To my Patreon subscribers, got a couple new episodes on there for you. Got a really fun video I did with comedian Jonah Jerkins, in which we played the classic American game, Fuck, Marry, Kill. So definitely check that out. Also, you can listen to my latest album. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you can stream music. You can listen to it on Pandora. Go ahead. I don't mind. I get like a penny per listen, but it's fine. I know it's tough times for everybody, but also big thanks to all my YouTube subscribers. You guys are fantastic. I love each and every one of you, even the ones I don't know, even the ones that are probably a little weird. I love you too, because you guys are here for me. But I'm very excited to get into today's podcast. I'm so excited. I'm stuttering already. Can you believe this? My guest today is a fantastic comedian. When I was starting stand-up in Chicago, like one of the names, or it's like Patti Vasquez was on like every Walt Zany's. That was like Zany's Comedy Club was the big comedy club in Chicago that every comedian wanted their picture on. And I remember seeing Patti's and knowing she was from Chicago. And then I found out she grew up in the same part of town as me, which was also like a big cool thing because I didn't really know anyone from like the Northwest side that went on to do comedy. It's more of a, union, drinking beer and, using your hands to work type of part of town. So it was really cool to discover Patti in that sense. And she's just a really awesome person. And I know you guys are a radio host too. So there's a lot of fun stuff going to be in this episode. So without further ado, let me introduce the one and only Patti Vasquez. How are you, Patti?
I'm great. Joe, that was really a wonderful intro. Thank you so much for having me. Welcome to my basement.
Thank you.
Welcome to the playroom.
It looks pretty good. You got a little tent back there?
Yeah,
it looks like?
The Buzz Lightyear rocket. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, never fear. Buzz is here. Oh, you got Cubs stuff.
Yeah, see, the basement I've turned into like where all my Cubs stuff is, but I also have like a lot of little kid stuff. I can reach over here. Here's a Toy Story. It's Bullseye, the rocking horse.
There you go.
Bullseye.
Yeah.
It used to make a sound. I don't think it does anymore though. Nah, it broke.
Sounds like my life. Doesn't work.
My 3-year-old and 1-year-old are obsessed with Toy Story to the point where we watch it almost every day, a version, because there's 4 movies now. There's all the shorts on Disney Plus and everything like that. And my wife and I looked up the Pixar history today. Pixar actually started as a subsidiary of Lucasfilms.
Right.
And then Steve Jobs bought it in 1986. And then Disney bought it in like 2000 something, which then made Steve Jobs the biggest shareholder in Disney because of the deal. It's a sick history of how rich Steve Jobs is, essentially.
It's incredible.
And yet I don't think he created anything. Yeah. He just was a guy that was like, that's a good idea. Here's some money. I mean, I think he was an innovator. Don't get me wrong, but it seemed like, I know this is like an old Bill Burr joke where he was like, hey, how about if we put all of our songs on one little thing? Well, who's going to do that? You do it. Get it done. And like he had other people doing it.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that part of it is seeing something you like and then figuring out how to bring it to life. But we have some Pixar books too, if you ever want to do a deep dive, because Griffin's kind of grown out of it. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I wouldn't mind that at all. My kids love books and everything like that. I'm very excited to have you on because a lot of the comedians I have on, they're fun. They've got cool backstories, but I think you've got one of the most interesting lives I've ever come across. Your stand-up has always been very family-oriented, which I think is really cool because you have a Mexican mother and an Irish father.
Yep.
So you got that blend of both worlds there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned being on the Northwest Side and using your hands and the working class sort of atmosphere of our community. My dad was a tuck pointer. Even though I always talk about him being a cab driver, he was a tuck pointer. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I could use some tuck pointing. No lie, because there's a little bit of the brick coming off the back of the house.
Well, I still have.
I imagine he's retired.
He passed away, but I still have his scaffolding. That's all right. But we had his tools for a long time, and a friend of his actually called us about 10 years ago and said, "Hey, do you have your dad's equipment still?" And we gave him all like there's. God, I used to know like the names of the tools, but there's like this flat part that you have the mortar and you sort of slap it in between the bricks. I used to help my dad. Yeah, it was nice. At Norwood Park. We lived on Northwest Highway. You remember where? You're too young, actually. But did you remember the Laser Zone on Northwest Highway?
No, but why the hell did that place close? That sounds awesome. Laser Zone.
I was assistant manager.
It was like a laser tag place?
Yeah. I was the assistant manager in 1988, but I lived upstairs, like 2 doors over. I lived above that. So on Northwest Highway, where now Edward Fox Studios is, right down the block from Roden Library. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is now.
Yeah. And so I came down the alley one day and I just see this like lawn chair hanging off the side of a chimney. And it was my dad. He had rigged his own chair off with a rope and a lawn chair and was just swinging back and forth, tuck pointing on the side of the chimney. Yep.
That's an innovator right there.
That's right.
I like that.
Yep.
That's cool. Why did a lasers place? How do you not make money doing a laser zone in a neighborhood with all these kids? Oh, whatever.
Well,
I'm just bummed I missed that window.
Maybe you let 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds run your joint who don't quite know what they're doing, and then they let their friends play for free. Maybe. I'm sorry I didn't know you at the time.
Yeah, I didn't think that through.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, like a laser tag place, a bar is one of those ideas where as a kid, everyone's like, wouldn't it be cool to own this? Wouldn't it be cool to own that? And then you become an adult and you realize, oh, wait, that sounds awful. That sounds like a headache. You know what I mean? Like owning a child's play place. Like actually that Kitty Kingdom, I don't know if you heard, they're going to close permanently because of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, oh, what a bummer, you know, because we've taken our kids there a few times. And I thought to myself, man, a lot of those places are going to go under. Those places where it's just like they got like a bounce house, they've got like a maze, they've got all these like kids stuff. And parents, you love it because you pay like $10, and the kids run around and tire themselves out, and you're like, sweet, they're going to take a 3-4 hour nap. This is perfect, and it wasn't that expensive. Obviously, you want to bathe them afterwards because you know some kids aren't very clean.
Right.
You know those ball pits. Who the hell would let their kid get into a ball pit after a global pandemic?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how long it took after 1917 for there to be ball pit. I don't know if there were ball pits in the 1920s, but no, you're right. I think that so many of the ways that kids that we grew up, that our kid, the way we raised our kids, that's all gone for the most part, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sad to me that certain businesses like that, you're like, is that going to come back? I can't imagine parents are going to be, even when things open back up completely, are parents going to rush back to a place like that? And then it sucks because our government didn't really take care of that level of business. Because that small business, that certain level, like I have a friend who has a yoga studio / like pole dancing studio in the South Loop.
Ooh.
And she's incredibly talented. My friend Caitlin Marco, it's called Fly Club Pole Dancing, everyone. If you're in the Chicago area, look it up. I think they're doing virtual classes now. It's like a mix of yoga and pole dancing. And we were actually going to do a stand-up comedy show there. Her and I were talking about setting it up for May. And it was going to be called Joke and Grind, kind of like Bump and Grind, but Joke and Grind. I think that's what the title was. And she's also a graphic artist. So she designed like a stand-up comedy microphone, like the mic stand, where it looks like a pole dancer is like, you know, working the mic stand.
The brass, shiny brass.
Yeah, the shiny brass. There you go. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be a cool idea. And a lot of perverted male comedians we know were like, dude, I got to get on that one. And I'm like, you're definitely not going to be on that one if you're that excited. Because, you know, comedy and burlesque is popular now. So we thought, maybe comedy and pole dancing would be cool. But I was talking to her, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this. I was like, are you going to get one of those loans? And she's like, no, because you have to pay that back. And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course it's a loan. And then the rates aren't that great.
Right.
And it's one of those things where once these businesses open back up, the money they were making pre-COVID, they would have to make even more just to justify the loan. So that's why a lot of them are just kind of going under, which really sucks. A place by us, so I'm rambling here a little bit, but I was really mad about this one. Stackers, which is at Northwest Highway in Nagel, that like was only open for about a year. Yep. Comedian Abby Sanchez, who we both know, who's been on the podcast, him and I would talk about how much we love that place. And it was my wife's favorite burger place, and they're done for good. Yeah. And it's depressing.
Well, it's interesting. So you mentioned your friend didn't want to try for this. So the problem was there were so many different types of loans and programs, like the CARES Act, the PPP, which is the protection payment payroll plan, right? And then there were small business loans. And anytime someone tried to apply for it, they just made it so hard for these smaller businesses. Whereas these bigger corporations, you saw these stories about big restaurants. That were able to get those loans because they already have a built-in infrastructure for lawyers who knew how to play the game, right? Who could game the system. But some of those loans are actually going to be forgiven loans, and people don't realize that. But who wants to take a chance on maybe it'll be forgiven and then at a percentage that they can't afford right now? It's insane.
Yeah, that's the thing that kills me the most. And we're going to get into some politics, of course. I have friends who are still big Trump supporters, and they will say stuff like, hey, you can't blame him for a pandemic. I'm like, well, his response was bullshit. He called it a hoax way too late into it. Also, though, look, yeah, you can't blame any president for a pandemic. But our government as a whole failed so badly, and you wouldn't have all these people freaking out being like, let us go back to work, 2 months ago or 2.5 months ago, even, and marching on state houses and capitals and all that kind of stuff. If the government said, all right, listen, this is a serious thing. We have to shut down businesses, but we're going to pay you in the meantime,
right?
Not just one $1,200 bullshit check. We're going to actually freeze bills so that there's a rent freeze, a mortgage freeze, and then everything will just start up again. It's like a timeout. It's like a pause on the economy. And some parts of the economy, but like hedge funds and big businesses, they might suffer a little bit, but they hey, should have saved for a rainy day, dickhead. You know what I mean? Like, I can't stand. They always tell the little guy, you should have been prepared, but the big guy never has to. How many times United Airlines, they never put any money aside? Sometimes I just think, let the airlines collapse, but then it affects all these other jobs. But I don't know. I go back and forth with like the economic theories behind that, because obviously in 2008 we couldn't let those banks collapse. I read so many books where it's like, oh man, it would have been really bad if we just let them all fold. But now I'm thinking, all right, maybe that's not the worst idea. I mean, not with a bank, but with an airline, especially one that people can't stand anyway.
Goodbye, Spirit. Is that what we're saying?
Oh, Spirit would be first to go, of course. Yeah. That is still, yeah. I mean, every comedian has Spirit jokes, but it really is one of those things that I don't even consider it a hacky subject. No. Because when you hear Spirit, anyone I know who flies semi-regularly, something on the back of their neck goes, oh, yeah, I remember the first time being on Spirit, and I felt like screws rattling. And it is a terrifying airline. Well, it's not even people complain about the extra cost. I complain about how it just doesn't feel safe in the sky.
No, there was duct tape on my seat. I mean, come on. I put that on my Toyota. I don't want to see it on my jet.
I trust a Toyota in air more than a Spirit plane.
I agree. But
I don't know if they use Boeing. I don't know who does it.
Yeah, exactly. But to your point about the federal response to the pandemic and whether or not you can blame Trump, all it took was for a very standard response to this that was applied to all the states. And now you see, Texas and Florida, Arizona, where it's getting out of control, and they're predicting that it's going to be up to 100,000 cases per day, at least, positive. And that doesn't mean people who are going to manifest the physical illness, but at the same time, that means that they continue to transmit it to people who might be vulnerable, and then put a strain on our healthcare system and our hospitals. It's unconscionable the way he handled this. And dismissed it. And he talks about how wearing a mask is political now, that if you wear a mask, that means that you're a Democrat or a lib or you're scared. And look, we see all the memes and all the conversations. I wear it to respect other people. I don't know, do you go for walks with the kids? Are you with yes. Your baby? Yes. So we go for walks. And, it's always great when you see your neighbor and then you give each other some space on the sidewalk. It's just kind. That's all. It's
fine. Yeah, I know. We even kind of stopped. Like, I remember we were walking today and there were some neighbors getting into their house. So I just kind of stopped and waited. And then they looked and they're like, oh, and then they kind of did a little bit of a hustle to get into their house a little bit quicker. It's, I got the Cubs stuff here. Cubs all-star first baseman and great humanitarian Anthony Rizzo. There was a video of him on Twitter yesterday because Cubs players were reporting to Wrigley Field to get tested because, they're going to try to start up the season. They say they're starting up the season, but I still have a weird feeling that something at the last minute's going to be like, nah, we can't do it. I'm knock on wood, actually. I want to think positive because I definitely do miss baseball. Is that he was walking, the videos, circulating Twitter. He's walking into Wrigley and some random people on the street were like, yo, Rizzo, hey, Anthony. And he's like waving and going, hey, what's up? And the one girl wasn't wearing a mask and he's got his mask on and he's pointing at his mask to her. And she's like, I know. And he's like shaking his head. And it's like professional athletes, every one of them was wearing a mask. I don't know why they have to make this a political thing. That's the problem, is that they have to make that. And by they, I don't just mean Republicans, because there are plenty of Democrats who pull this stuff too. Everything, every little thing
I agree,
cannot be political, especially since like scientists, I know people were like, Dr. Fauci's a quack. This guy was appointed by Reagan in 1984 and has been in that job since, through Democrat and Republican presidents. All of a sudden, he just decided this whole idea of it's this mass conspiracy to make Trump look bad. I don't want to put this out there, but assassination would have been way easier than getting 100 countries together to lie about a pandemic. It just doesn't make sense to me at all that people can just buy into this. But that's just the world we're living in now.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people take their politics as a personal attack on them. So if anything that's out there just sort of hits them the wrong way, it becomes they go into mode, and that's where we are right now, I think, for everybody. And it's a shame because people are dying. Joe, there were three in the first 2 weeks. There were three people that I knew that died from COVID-19 back in March. Within a week after the shelter in place, a friend of mine, her husband, I went to Lane Tech with a woman named Gretchen and her husband Alvin, who I'd only met last at the Throwback Fest. Have you ever gone to Throwback Fest? Over in Gladstone?
Gladstone Park, where they do like retro 80s music and stuff. I went like the 1 year, a couple years ago.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I met him and, just got a message that her husband had died. There was a neighbor over by St. Tars who I had just met during the campaign. He passed away. And then there was a veterinarian who did a lot of pro bono work for rescued animals in the neighborhood who died within a week.
That's my animal hospital.
Oh, really?
The one, yeah, we got that email from the animal hospital that said I think the owner of it died. I believe it was the owner.
Over in Niles.
So that sucks. And my wife's a nurse, so I did an episode of the podcast where I told people this isn't a joke. I mean, she's telling me horror stories that I can't repeat with detail because there's HIPAA laws and stuff like that. But basically, of people coming in on a Friday and dying on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And and some sad stuff. So I just, and clearly the fact that the states of Texas and Florida, who both were like, their governors were like, it's the cold and it's fine and blah, blah. They are now, Texas is now, I saw this 3 hours ago. I got like a little news alert for it on my phone saying that the governor of Texas has now ordered face masks after recently saying he would never make an order of face masks being required. Wow. So, and here's what I need to tell people too, and I'm sure I've said this before on the podcast, so to my loyal listeners, I apologize for sounding like a broken record. When billion-dollar industries like the NCAA, NBA, Major League Baseball, AMC movie theaters, like all of these, maybe Hollywood studios, when all of them shut down, it's serious because they don't not want to make money. Their only thing they want to do is make money. They operate to make money. So when that ends, I mean, that's a huge part of the economy and something that really screwed over our profession as comedians. We were talking about the triple P and all the loans for businesses. I finally, fingers crossed, today, after struggling to figure it all out, got my unemployment insurance, I'm pretty sure, figured out. Because they had a weird thing, too, with that where, we're considered like gig workers, I guess, performers, entertainers, essentially. So, we operate with 1099s and whatnot. Here's what you had to do. This is so stupid. You had to apply for the regular Illinois unemployment insurance, which I knew I would get rejected for, but that's the part of the process. You have to get rejected. Then only after getting rejected could you apply for the PUA, which is the pandemic unemployment assistance or whatever, which is just such a stupid thing. Let me go straight to the thing. Why make me fill out all this stuff just to reject me? So then I have to fill out. It was such a headache. And you probably know a lot about it too.
Well, it also highlights, because there are so many people across the country who are independent contractors. That's what we are for the most part, whether you're a Lyft driver or a comic, and a lot of different artists. And there's a lot of, independent contractors in different parts of different industries. But imagine, what's even worse, not just being an independent contractor trying to qualify for PUA. Imagine having W-2s and 1099s. They didn't know what to do with any of that. And imagine you maybe had a company that fired you. And
we'll get to that.
And perhaps denied your unemployment when you originally applied for it. So then it hangs up the whole thing. So there were a lot. There are a lot of people who, and even now, people who try to call are unable to get through the system to even figure out how they qualify for unemployment. It's really, I think it's one of the things that's going unreported, and people are not, calling attention to as much, because it's just people on the phone every day trying to get through, or online, and they keep getting, dumped out of the system. It's, those aren't folks that are likely to show up at the governor's office or even like register more than a question at a press conference. And it's sad.
And you can't go into the office and explain yourself. No. I had a weird thing that when I first applied, I think they've then changed the rule because I got something from SAG-AFTRA saying that the residuals won't count against you. Like SAG went out of everyone that's the Screen Actors Guild, a union I'm part of, and they went out of their way to send an email going, hey, this shouldn't affect you from getting pandemic unemployment insurance. Was that I received a residual check like the last week of March for like $18 from an episode Chicago Med I did, which was a television show that Patti, you were on like 3 or 4 episodes of, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
A good crew of people working over on Chicago Med. It's fun to be on a Dick Wolf show, you know?
Oh yeah.
Right. A lot of money there, or a lot of success there, I should say. But actually I do mention, I was talking to a friend recently because there's that notion. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, everyone. Just a quick side note because I'll forget to mention this.
That's how we work.
That's how we talk. Yeah. Is that I saw like a tweet saying there are no good billionaires. And I don't know if your comedian brain works like this. I think most comedians' brains do work like this. When we hear there's no something, we go, well, that can't be true. Right. I have to find the opposite. So I looked it up. There are some good billionaires. Dick Wolf, as far as I know, is a good billionaire because the TV shows he creates are all union shows. So everyone's getting paid well. Where like a lot of billionaires, like even Jordan, who I love, the money he made off of his playing as a basketball player is great. But he got his billions off of shoes. The shoes are sweatshops. So he exploited, or Nike, but through him as well, he benefited from it. They built a lot of the empire on exploiting child labor in other countries. So you can't really say good billionaire there, can you? And here's another good billionaire for you. And I've been on a big Beatles kick, Paul McCartney.
There you go.
He's, where I don't think he exploited anyone to write songs. I don't know what. Usually artists get screwed over the other way. So the fact that he's become a billionaire off of a lot of like royalties and selling albums and I'm sure concerts will go to show you that like, okay, yeah, I can't imagine too many people got ripped off in the process of him becoming a billionaire. Anyhow, all right, back to what I was saying though.
Yes.
I got a residual check. So then they were saying I got paid by one of my employers. I'm like, I got an $18 check. How do you guys not see that I'm not living off an $18 residual check from doing 3 lines on a TV show 2 years ago? It was just, and so that is another thing that if you were talking to a human being and not the computer and a computer system that's backed up because that's one thing where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of with Republicans in the sense that I think it's like government programs are smart and stuff like that. But how Republicans always say the government can't do anything right. With some websites, they fuck it up badly.
Oh.
And it's like, stop hiring people and actually source this out to like find a 23-year-old fresh out of Silicon Valley, and they'll run it 1,000,000 times better. You'll save some money in the process because every government website I've ever dealt with is stupid.
Oh, and the website, I mean, you can go to, there are comics who have better websites that are interactive in ways that the state cannot seem to do.
Hannibal's website is amazing.
Yeah. I'll have to visit his website. We have to tell him.
It's really cool, actually. Yeah. His website, when you go to it, it's got like the homepage, and as you scroll up, it shows like clips of him on like him walking on a Conan, shaking Conan's hand, and you don't hear the sound, but I think you hear like some like hip hop music as like it shows him like seen in the movies he's been in. Forget how many movies he's been in lately. He was in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Exactly. Isn't that exciting? He's the coach. The
so cool.
Teacher.
Yeah, it's great. Hannibal's a friend of ours, everyone. Hannibal Buress. If you're a comedy fan, you know who the hell Hannibal Buress is.
Yeah, he's
so
great.
I'm glad we could talk a little politics because you ran in my district. I had proud lawn signs, and I still have the lawn signs, actually.
Good. I'm going to need them.
No, I know, because that's what I said.
Hold on to them, yep.
Well, I had another person's lawn sign on my lawn. I threw that one away, but yours, I'm like, I can't throw it away. It's my friend Patti. So it's in my backyard against the back fence there.
I'll hold on to it for you.
Well, I put it in the garage and I'll throw it back on the lawn. Right, so I'm glad you're not giving up because I think you did incredibly well. I think you should be very proud of yourself. I know you didn't get the result you wanted, but for someone who had never run for office before in the Democratic machine that is Chicago politics, which I know you've got some stories about. Let's start at the beginning though.
Yeah.
What was the final? You were like, was it like you got like 37% of the vote? And she got like 43 or 44?
Yeah, it was somewhere around there. So there were three candidates. There was an incumbent who had been appointed and had the full force of the machine, as you mentioned. And the last I had seen, because I didn't get the final numbers, and I think that, we go back and forth on it. I was in the high 30s, she was in the low 40s, and Joe was in the low 20s. That's kind of the best I have of that, because you have to remember, obviously, we were in the day of the primary was the full force of the pandemic. And leading up to that day, there were people who were doing mail-in ballots. A lot of people didn't get their ballots in time. We don't know when they were counted. So the final numbers, there's just, for me, there's no strategizing for a pandemic. No campaign has ever had to do that. So, I'm proud of it, and I know I scared a lot of people, and word is that I continue to scare them, and that's fine by me.
Hell yeah, I like that attitude. Get in there and mess up their worlds. Yeah, no, people. I used to be a weird. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Like when I was younger, I had this like idealism about how things should be, and I think I got this from like an episode of The West Wing, where the president said, "When you trust the voters, like elections are term limits. By setting term limits."
Yeah.
When you have term limits, you are essentially saying that you don't trust the voters because they won't be able to spot corruption. So we have to get people out after a certain amount of years.
Right.
And I used to be like, no, I'm against term limits, but I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, maybe they're not that bad of an idea, because you get these cogs in this machine that make it very difficult for other people to get into that world. And I'm sure you have some stories. I remember talking to you not that long ago about how you were like, trying to get support from someone, and they were like, well, actually, we heard that you did this one time, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what? And there was it became one of now it was state representative, which is nice. You go down to Springfield and you help, shape laws for the state of Illinois. That's a big deal. Don't get me wrong. But I've never in my life, and granted, I'm only 35, but I've paid attention, especially to local politics. My grandfather was a Cook County Circuit Court judge. I come from a family where we'd get together every Sunday for dinner. And even as a 7-year-old, I remember hearing all the adults like talking loudly about politics, especially local. So I've always kind of kept an eye to it. I don't recall a local election getting nasty the way this one did.
Yep.
Apparently, everyone, Patti hates women.
Not only that,
yes, doesn't want them to have the right to choose. Wants them all to be barefoot and pregnant, and I'm joking, obviously. But give us a little backstory on that.
Sure. That was surprising, but I will say this, and there's a lot to it, and it would require a very long conversation that you and I could have a couple of bottles of JMO over. But no, you're right. And what was unique about this was the incumbent, not only did she send out negative mailers. Typically, what I learned during the campaign is if you're going to send out negative mailers that are that heinous, you have what's called an independent expenditure. So somebody else pays for it for you. So your name isn't even on it. It's not like vote for, Lindsay LaPointe. It's, it's just a sort of it's just a nasty front to back attack mailer. What she did was what we understand is that nobody else wanted to pay for it because it was so outside even for many people in Chicago and Illinois politics, it was beyond the pale. Because the other thing is I worked very hard for many years in Springfield trying to call attention to our legislature. I also tried to, make sure that the message was getting out there to what their work was, what Democrats were trying to accomplish. So I have a lot of friends in Springfield, and she has lost a lot of respect amongst people. Like people are still talking about how nasty those mailers are. So the mailers, for folks who aren't familiar with the Northwest Side politics or hadn't seen this, by the way, Joe, there were 5. There were 5 different ones that came out for a total of 500, at least 500,000 pieces of paper with my face on them, attacking me and a police officer named Joe Duplessis. We are both accused of being dangerous extremists. And
I know, which is so crazy to me.
And
I think twice a week I would get them twice a week for like the month of like mid-February to right up to the election. I was getting these every day, and I'm getting them, just throwing them right into the garbage because I know you and I know it's not true. But yeah, it's weird. I just can't remember like such foul play over, you expect that for presidential politics, U.S. senator, perhaps governor, but I've never seen it for like a local thing.
It was shocking. Well, and so part of that was her mentor, who had previously been my mentor, who is now your state senator, was somebody I had worked with for a very long time, and he had access to information about a situation that happened at my previous employer. So what you might not have noticed on the last 2 negative mailers, it went from disgusting extremist. It was, she's being funded by right-wing conservatives who supported somebody else who don't believe in abortion, even in the cases of rape and incest. So that was so, and what they did was they highlighted the words in red, rape and incest. So it looked like I was somebody who would not protect victims or survivors. And part of the problem for me was that I am a survivor. I was sexually assaulted when I was 4 years old. So that was one of the reasons we came out swinging. And Joe Duplessis, the police officer, was linked to domestic violence. He's a survivor of domestic violence. His father brutalized his mother, and it was very upsetting for him. Here's a guy who served in the military, is a police officer, and the incumbent, who is right now our legislator, had no problem attacking survivors. So she claims to be the social worker. It's fascinating. The whole thing is fascinating. But the senator prompted her. I just found out recently that the senator actually fed information to one of the other campaigns. So one of the mailers that you might not have noticed said that I had an order of protection against me. Did you notice that one?
No,
Yeah.
I didn't see that one. That's strange.
Yeah. So because it was the fourth and fifth ones, they sent out. They all look pretty much the same, and then they started changing the language.
They had to start throwing them in the garbage.
Thank you. But here's the thing. A lot of people did.
Actually, I started wiping my ass with them, and it wasn't good paper.
I was out.
I wanted to.
It was surreal, but I was out in front of the 16th district police station, and people during the early voting, and people would yell at me. You don't believe in a woman's right to choose. You don't support victims. In front of the Jefferson Park train station, someone said, "Are you as crazy as those mailers say?" So the reason that they used the OP, it said Patti harassed a coworker so badly they sought an order of protection. So at my previous employer, where I worked for many years, and you joined me at that previous employer.
Yeah. Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah, I reported sexual harassment and abuse, and they made my life much harder and worked to marginalize me. And then when I submitted 6 pages of abuse from a coworker, and when they found out about my report, they went into a courtroom and tried to. They got an order of protection, but they also put on that I might have a weapon on me or in my home. And the reason I know that is because the senator has a very good friend who's in the Cook County Sheriff's Department. They pulled the file for me, read it to me over the phone to my lawyers, so we would know exactly what was on the report before I was served. I was never served. So they fed all that. They put that on the whole thing was dismissed and vacated because there was no proof I hadn't done anything to harass or intimidate or threaten this young person. And they were just angry because they felt like I hadn't paid some price or I hadn't gotten in enough trouble at work. Yep. Yeah. And they put that on the mailer. And the thing is, for the rest of their political careers, these people, it's so short-sighted because they are willing to attack survivors of sexual violence, sexual harassment, and workplace abuse. That's out there now. That's public record. They have no compunction to try to squash somebody, but I think you're pretty aware they picked the wrong girl.
Oh, no. Yeah, I knew. I mean, I remember just thinking to myself, I had no doubt in my mind that you'd run again, because I just know the type of person you are, that you're not going to let walls get in your way. You're going to be like, oh, okay. All right. You're building with that type of material. I need to get something that's going to knock that down. Yeah. And so let me ask you this then. We're talking about the negative aspect of it. Yeah. Let's start with, why did you decide to run? Sure. Let's just go with that obvious question. What made you decide, all right, I'm going to put my hat in the ring? And I know you'd been political for a while on your radio show on WGN. You used to go down to Springfield, and you fought for the rights of autistic children, special needs kids, which is amazing and great. And not just for your son, but for children everywhere, which is fantastic. So I always knew you were political, but when I heard you were running, I was like, first of all, I could see that, but I wanted to know why exactly. Because a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people are like, I'd like to, I joke around being like, I could be an alderman. Why not? But who knows? A lot of people don't follow through on those type of things, but you actually followed through. You put your name out there. What made you decide to do it?
If anyone ever even thinks about it, email me, and I will encourage you. If it's something that you're passionate about and you have the time and the support of your family, do not hesitate to reach out, because you should never. It's kind of like the idea of don't die without that book you want to write or that song you want to sing or whatever. Don't end your life not pursuing that thing that you thought you could have done or should have done. And I'm really proud of the race that we ran. I thought about it about 10 years ago because my son Declan was born medically fragile. I say autism because the way he behaves is very classically acknowledged as looking autistic, but Declan's missing part of his brain. And he wasn't supposed to live. When he was born, the doctors did not think he would survive. And about 10 years ago, when he was 4 or 5 years old, I started thinking that, I had no idea what it was like to raise a child who was significantly disabled. We always see families and we feel sorry for them. And, you kind of think, thank God it's not me. That's just part of it. And it's just true. And I think that's okay to be honest about it. But from the inside of it, from the inside, I thought I could do a lot to help people because of my perspective from this side of how hard life can be, because it's sort of, for me, translated to not just disability, but also poverty and racial injustice and gender issues. Healthcare, actually at the very top of it is healthcare. To me, healthcare is the battle of our lifetime. It is what keeps people in jobs they don't like. It's what keeps them from being able to live the life they want. So that was why I wanted to run. And I thought maybe alderman, and I was dissuaded from that. And that was in 2009. We had an alderman that had been there for a long time. And then John Arena won the aldermanic race a couple years later. And, he was fine. And actually was on my show a few times, developed a relationship with him. And in the meantime, started going to Springfield when Governor Rauner started making really severe cuts to services across the state. And that's when, and I had already been advocating in Springfield for different services starting in 2010. But in 2015, that's when I really, and what's crazy about this, Joe, and I think we might have talked about this, the same year I started going to Springfield was the same year I sold my sitcom to ABC Studios. I sold a sitcom based on my life. And it's funny because thinking about it now, what
was the name of it again?
It was called Patti Happens.
Okay, Patti Happens. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah,
because I remember you flying out to LA a bunch.
Yeah,
during that time.
Yeah, we were under development. We went to script. We did not shoot the pilot. We were down. It was between me and Gabriel Iglesias, who is one of the most successful comedians in the world. He's like the top 3 ticket selling comics.
Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Ticket wise.
Gotcha.
And he's a little bit, but you know what I mean.
It's just, and it was crazy because all I wanted to do was be in Springfield. Here I was, Joe. I got the brass ring, but it wasn't a show that I was writing. I basically sold my life rights because my life is crazy. And it's called Patti Happens because I can take any situation and make it much worse for everyone, which leads us back to politics. So I got very involved. And when Trump won, I was on the air at my previous job. And at the end of my show, at 2 a.m., he took the stage. We went to the green room afterwards. And I told my political roundtable, I go, I make me a candidate. What does it take to run for office? And so we started looking around, and the legislators that we had, Representative Martwick and Senator Mulrow, were people that I felt were doing a job. They were getting the votes. They were well regarded. They had, these war chests with incredible amounts of money. And we just didn't see a path. I didn't see running against them or John Arena. And then Senator Mulrow became a judge. And that's where everything started last April. I started pursuing that appointment. The representative, Martwick, decided to take the Senate seat, and a bunch of there were a lot of deals that were made. And to your point about how you still think we kind of carry that idea that good people should run, that we lead up to the voters, but there are a lot of mechanisms in place. And one of the things that I've learned in the last year are even the people that talk these grand stories about democracy under the surface, there's a lot of power that is not just controlled, but there's a lot of energy put towards making sure that doesn't ever become vulnerable. And I like I said, I'm more than happy to have scared them a little bit. And so I decided to pursue the rep seat because the legislator was somebody who no one was familiar with. They didn't have a lot of experience. There was no reason. There wasn't enough money for me to run against the senator. It's a double the district. So, you and I live in the 10th Senate district and the 19th rep district. There's about 110,000 voters I believe in the 19th. And then so double that. The 10th district goes all the way up to Rosemont, parts of Park Ridge, a little bit of Niles. It's massive. So
that's it. Yeah. 110,000 voters. I mean, that's people over the age of 18. So you mix kids in there. It's a pretty good size there. I mean, what is it? 600,000 people you get a US rep. So that tells you how big it is in, state level right there. All right. So you decided, all right, I'm going for it.
I'm going for it. So that was a long way to tell you, but yeah, it was fascinating. It was, and I started my PAC. So you start a political action committee. You go in and you fill out the paperwork. You say, friends of Patti Vasquez, you name it, what you think is the best way to go. And we were off to the races. I just started going door to door, not ringing bells. And before even signatures, I would just go to my neighbors and I say, hi, I'm Patti. I'm going to run to be your rep. Tell me what's important to you. How can I help you? And that's what I started doing back in August.
Okay, let me ask you this. What did you love about it first? Then I'll ask you what you hated about it.
Sure.
But what did you enjoy the most about running for office?
Oh, definitely talking to people, learning their stories. I mean, and it's corny because what happened along the way was I would see the incumbent say the same things, knowing that we were on far more doors. By the time everything was said and done, I was up to about 250 doorbells that I was ringing, and we were averaging about 30 some conversations because you figure people don't answer their doors or they're not home. They got a lot of ring bells. And Joe, you'll love this. As a comic, I became a performance artist. So for the ring bells, I would have a piece of paper that would say, "Hi, my name is Patti Vasquez. I'm running to be your state rep. I'm just your neighbor," and my website. So from the Love Actually movie. So it was.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And we had volunteers come into our office. They were like, that's the funniest thing I ever saw, but you have to find a way to connect with people because not everybody wants to talk to somebody ringing their doorbell,
Were there any live debates?
There were no debates. There were.
That's a bummer because as a comedian, I feel like you'd have a leg up on both of them.
I'm just saying.
I always wanted to. I don't think I could ever run for actual office. I don't think I have the temperament for it. I feel like
I would love to see that race, my friend. Yeah, I would love to see that, Joe.
I feel like I'd threaten to fight the other people. But I always thought I'd be a great political consultant.
Ooh.
Because, I'm good at comebacks. So whenever I think to myself, if they run this political ad, bam, we hit them with this one. So easy. Yeah. I was always good. On the schoolyard, if someone was doing your mama jokes, I dominated those. And I think debates are essentially that.
Yeah,
and that's where I feel like, sadly though, because there used to be some level of decorum which has gone away. I remember going back to the whole Trump being elected in 2016. I remember watching the first debate with Trump, Trump versus Hillary, and all my friends who were Hillary supporters being like, she was so poised, she did so great, she killed him. And I remember being like, you don't know the average person like I do. You don't know the average voter. Right. I think he won that. And my friends were like, no way he won that. I go, he looked like a child up there. I go, nah, he got the sound bites. And I see that gif all the time of Trump leaning into the microphone and be like, wrong.
Right.
Those were, he knows how to do television.
Right.
People could hate him all you want, and you for good reason to hate him, but he does know television.
Yes.
He knows reality TV. He knows what gets people riled up, which is why he's given up on the pandemic. He doesn't talk about it anymore because he knows it's an L. It's a loss.
There's no
So now he's talking about statues. He's talking about statues and flags and kneeling because there's that he could rile his people up. But if he talks about the pandemic, they'll be reminded of, you were an idiot by this. So it's a loss for him. And that's anyway, though. I just feel like as a comedian, we're pretty good at. I would have done it in a classier way, but I was pretty good at doing a thing where I'm like, I could debate you and be able to stay on message, but also have people going, damn it, I want to vote for that person,
but here was the thing, we had several forums I'm trying to think. I think the first one we had was the Jefferson Park Chamber of Commerce, and that was fine. And then, we often were in the same room, Joe and LaPointe and me, like for endorsement sessions, like SEIU for unions and things like that. And that's another beast altogether, as far as like, they tend to go either with the incumbent, and because I was running against a police officer and a tradesman. So Joe Duplessis is in the Carpenters Union. So I was actually kind of fortunate because the AFL-CIO went neutral because there was an incumbent. But then CTU, SEIU, Lindsay ended up raising about $300,000. Joe, I think $330,000. Joe raised over $200,000. I came in at a little over 100. So again, proud of what we accomplished with what we had. And LaPointe got like endorsement after endorsement from like the heavy hitters. Somebody called in a ton of favors. Durbin, Quigley, Lightfoot. I mean, it was like body blow after body blow. I'm like, why do you care? And to your point, Joe, a rep race doesn't typically bring in your federal, your national leaders. You don't have Quigley, Durbin. That never happens.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
And that was what was crazy, was that their photos are on the negative mailers calling me a disgusting extremist. And the fact that she attacked the survivor of sexual harassment and sexual violence and a police officer. We wanted to run an ad that said Durbin and Quigley hate moms and cops. We're like, what are you doing? It was very strange. And I look, they say that politics is a game of addition. You want to add supporters, you want to build relationships. But a while, and I plan on telling my story, and I have no qualms about that. But I think because we are comics, I do love the fight. So we all were together at the Sun Times. We all presented. I mean, when you had a good show, Joe, we know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it. You can't go to bed that night.
No,
like you can't go to bed right away.
Let's do it again.
I've often told people where I remember when I first started doing stand-up all the time, and you got to the point where you're like, oh yeah, this is what I need to be doing and what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Because you're killing it consistently. I remember telling my wife, I'm like, look, when I have a killer set, I can't come home and go right to bed.
Exactly.
Because I'm too you gotta
the adrenaline.
Ride that high a little bit. Yeah, you got the adrenaline going.
Yeah.
You wanna. Yeah. That's why comedians and musicians and anyone like athletes, I'm sure, when you have, if you're a professional athlete and you drop 30 points, you drop a triple double. You want to go to the bar afterwards. Yeah. You want to go hang out.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. Yeah. And then to do that politically, it was so like, it was weird to know that the deck was stacked against me, really feeling good about the fact that I knew I was a better candidate, that I would do a better job. And I don't say that because it sounds so narcissistic, but as comics and as somebody who runs for office, you have to believe you can do the job for people. And what I believed, and I will say this for the rest of my, this will be my first campaign. I'll always remember this. The incumbent is not a lion. She's not somebody who will fight and push things. She will just push the button and be like, this is a good enough bill. I want to know how we make that bill better. How do we make sure that legislation doesn't have unintended consequences? How do we hold people accountable? And the other thing was, I was not going to be beholden to anybody. No special interests, no heavy power politicians, not the machine. And that was something that was exciting to know that we had a chance at being somebody unique that could bring new energy to our state government where it's so desperately needed. And I will say, and I'm sure you know about this, and please don't hesitate I'm not uncomfortable talking about my family history that had to come out during the campaign, about my name. Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember you told me when I was a guest on your show, your radio show.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, I think at the time there was some play.
Oh, yeah.
At one of the Northwest Side theaters.
Was it the haunted house? I think it was both. There was a haunted house and there was the
haunted house or
both,
something like that. And I brought it up and you said, if I could handle seeing that given my family history. And then I was kind of like, hey, you look like, what history is this? Because you never know. Some things that when people say family and history, you tread lightly as the person not part of that. You don't want to just be like, hey, what happened? Yeah. Your brother This was an older brother or younger brother?
My older brother. My dad's only son.
Okay.
So my half brother, Michael. Yep.
Was one of John Wayne Gacy's victims, which is, obviously that's one of the most famous serial killers in, United States America history right there. I mean, I think 33 victims he had or something pretty high like that.
That they know. Yes. 33 that they know. And, so throughout my life, I've talked to a lot of the people who are close to the case. So, and the reason this comes up is because I chose the last name Vasquez as it's my mother's maiden name. When I started doing stand-up comedy in 1996, it was the same summer that John Wayne Gacy was going to be executed. And I decided that, was it 95? Might have been 95. But he was going to be executed. And the idea that our names were going to be in the paper again, Bonin is not a very common name. And the thought of people knowing that a part of my story or my history and then wanting to know, I mean, can you imagine doing Mancow's show for like the number of years? That's all he would have ever, they called me when the story came out. And the reason the story came out was because LaPointe's campaign started a whisper campaign. That's what they call a whisper campaign, where for us, it was messages. So people from her campaign started messaging people and saying, oh my God, Patti Vasquez is using her husband's name to sound more white, thinking that Bonin was I never changed my name from Bonin because it was my dad's name and Mike was the last boy in the family. So I never changed my name to my husband's name. So they started saying that I was pandering to white people. And then they started spreading rumors with other people saying I was using Vasquez to pander to Latinos and progressive voters. And I honestly, Joe, I mean, to hold that story so tightly and to be so protective, to think that I was going to be in public forums and be asked like, well, why do you use this name? I was like, it's time, because I had to use the name on the ballot legally. I was like, okay, let's get ahead of this. Let's make sure that we don't have to be at an endorsement session. And I didn't know if I would start crying in the middle of a meeting. I had no idea. So
yeah, I think that's, what gets me though, the same people who would be like, oh, she used this for this and used this for that. Those are the people who would 100% do that. You know what I mean? Those are the people who, if they were running for judge, would be like, my name's Margaret Patricia Kelly McGuire Sullivan. Like, those are the people who would, I know I have a fucking shamrock on my podcast logo right now, but that's a thing. Maybe my national listeners don't know this, but in Chicago politics, the judges, you just say yes or no on when you get your ballot.
Right.
And there was an old saying in Chicago, just vote for the Irish last names.
Yeah.
That went around for whatever reason, because, the Irish were very political. They got a hold of the Democratic machine through Mayor Daley in the 50s and 60s and beyond that. And so, everyone was like, make your name sound even more Irish. So some people would they would use their first initial, I noticed.
Yes.
I've seen on the ballot, it would be like J. Mary O'Sullivan or whatever.
Right.
And it's like, what was it, Juanita? Like, what's the J for? Where you're hiding. Because if you hide your first initial, that's weird, Or they're using middle names when they never would normally use middle names. Or, I'm surprised one day you're going to see on a Chicago, Cook County ballot, I should say, the whole county, you're going to see something that says like Colleen, Patricia, and then M. It's going to be the last name is going to be the initial. Right. Because they're going to be hiding the last name from being like, I don't know, like a Polish last name or something. They're going to minimize it. It's a crazy thing. So when Bonin showed up, I'm sure these were people who just want the gossip of like, how dare you, or you're doing this or you're doing that, when those are the same people who would do it if they had the chance. You never notice that the same people who say they're using the race card. I'm like, you are mad that you can't use it. You would use it every day. That would be your ace of spades if you could use it.
Well, get this, Joe. Well, we started the first mailer, or they call it a walk piece. So when I rang your bell, I was so excited. I'm like, I texted you. I'm like, please tell me this is your door. It said Kilgallon on the door. But her
that's right.
Yeah, her first walk piece. So it's lit and you put it in the door. I had been giving speeches and we had been in different forums up until like leading up to the first time we saw her walk piece. I'm not kidding you. It said has her extensive work with children with special needs. And we were like, you're trying to own the territory. I mean, it was so funny. She was chasing a challenger, trying to occupy this territory of helping children with disabilities. It's like it had never come up. Not once had she ever said, I helped. And so that whole idea of pandering was fascinating to me because, and it's something that people continue to do. They'll say that I was pandering to white people. I was pandering to Latinos. I mean, I guess as a comic, as performers, we just aim to please. And I guess that's the same thing as pandering. We just like show up and we're ourselves. But the idea that I'm like being calculated about something is just so strict. It's just not, it's outside of my experience.
I know. I want to apologize earlier. At one point I was looking off. I was getting like my computer. I'm getting pop-ups on this stupid thing all of a sudden. You ever had that with your computer where all of a sudden you're like, why am I getting pop-up ads? And I disabled this in 2013.
I don't know how to do any of that. Yeah.
I probably went on a website I shouldn't have gone on. Anyhow, I had a couple notes that I wanted to ask you.
Yes. I'm ready.
Were you obviously you weren't worried that any of your past jokes would hurt you as a candidate, right?
There was a point where we had I spent more money on the front end than I wish I had that to do over again, because you're new and people come at you and they're like, we'll do this for you, we'll do that for you. And one of the things they wanted to do was go through my material to find any jokes that could be used against me. And I was like, I'm sorry, 25 years of stand-up comedy plus 5 nights a week of 3 to 4 hours of radio. I was like, I don't have that kind of money. If they have it, I always knew it was going to be the order of protection. I always knew that the incumbent's mentor would use that. None of my campaign believed it. And I was like, no. They had nothing else to use at all.
Yeah,
except for my material. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned with comedy. That's obviously there's a whole lot going on in the world of social media in which comedians are getting in trouble for things they used to say. And I'm not sticking up for any of the things some people said some really dumb stuff. Some other people, it's like, okay, let's relax a little bit here. But like you said, 25 years of stand-up comedy plus doing a radio show 5 nights a week for 3 hours. It's just inevitable. It's inevitable. Like I've done this podcast now 106 episodes. The average episode's an hour and a half. So we're talking about over hundreds of hours, but over 100 hours of me talking. And sometimes you say, like I hinted at a Gabriel Iglesias fat joke earlier. I'm not one of those dudes. But we said he's huge, and I'm like, he only is huge. But like, it's just if you're doing this much talking, you're going to say some stupid things. Yeah. He's fly. He calls himself that. But but someone could take them and be like, see, look at that. Joe Kilgallon hates fat people. I do not. Although this is a funny story. A cousin of mine recently but bought his daughter. They have plus size Barbies now. Okay, which is great. That's great, But the thing that sucks about it is that he had to buy a whole new wardrobe because his little 6-year-old daughter was like, how come none of my old Barbie clothes fit on this one? And he's like, well, it's plus size Barbie. And so he's laughing to himself thinking, everyone thought this was such like a woke thing. And really it's the most capitalist thing in the world.
Yeah, you get more stuff.
Supply side economics. He's just buying more shit for Barbie. Anyway, that made me laugh because I was that's funny.
Is that pandemic Barbie? It's COVID-19 she's put on.
That one would have like its own, respirator or whatever would come with it. What's the word? Ventilator. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Oh man. All right. So,
and the other thing was, I did have someone sweep my social media. Well, I mean, it's the best of their ability.
You never know. Yeah.
I mean, take it out of context. But the one thing was funny was that there was a debate over. I've trained in firearms. So with the FBI Citizens Academy, I've learned how to shoot a Glock and an automatic rifle. And they were like, oh, you can't have those on there for, they'll use it out of context. And it's like, it was just,
I think it would have helped you on the Northwest side, maybe.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
but my answer to that is, as a historian, as an American, I mean, I believe in the Constitution. I think that we do need to have firearm legislation that is reasonable and safe. And I think that owning a firearm is part of our rights as Americans, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think if you want to have a gun to protect your house, you want a rifle to go hunting, hunting's not a thing I'm a fan of because I like animals, but go for it. Yeah. I just think we should maybe make it a little bit harder for psychos to buy a gun.
Yeah, I think that there should be insurance. I think you should have to buy insurance, firearm insurance.
Sure, absolutely, like you would for a car. Why not? That's a good policy. That also could lead to the segue of my next question, which is what. Sorry, let me double check here my notes. I've never interviewed a politician before. Did you have any like new ideas that you were like, no one is talking about this? This is something I want to implement that I think will be popular amongst people on both sides of the aisle. And I can't wait to try to get this done.
Well, actually, one of the things is crucial right now, and a lot of people are talking about it now, is I wanted to do trauma intervention for first responders, not just for the police officers and firemen, but someone who, because of my experience, as a child, when we got the phone call that my brother had been discovered in Gacy's house, there wasn't any sort of attention paid to the family. There wasn't, trauma, like dealing with what that mental health issue would be like. And I think that a lot of communities, the violence is perpetuated because we aren't going in and making sure that there is support with mental health. And our first responders, there's a stigma for cops if they ask for help or if they say they need to talk to somebody, like that stays with them for the rest of their careers. That was one thing I wanted to do, was crisis intervention.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
That's great.
And I think that there are other cities that are doing a good job of implementing mental health experts. So in Denver and Las Vegas and Eugene, Oregon, they triage 911 calls and they'll send out a squad. But if it's a domestic violence, if it's an overdose, if there is, suspicion of there being a need for a social worker or mental health expert, they're also sent out. And I think that would be really helpful in Chicago. And the other thing, my big picture, and I mentioned this before about healthcare, we have no standardized system for billing. Did you see this story in Texas where 2 people were tested for COVID-19 and the one guy paid $200 cash? He had $200 bills. It cost him $199 to get tested. And another woman used her insurance and she was billed over $6,000 for the exact same test at the same hospital because it wasn't cash and because it could go through her insurance company, it could go through these different offices, it's through the actual, all these different things. And we have no standardization. That should be standardized. There is no way a test should be $200 in cash for one person and over $6,000. This is how people are going broke.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of criminal elements as far as I'm concerned with things like that. I know people who, I remember I was visiting, I lived in LA from 2014 to 2017 and I'd come home Thanksgiving, maybe every other year I was gone. And I remember, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving's a big drinking day. You actually know who the person is, but I'll off air, I'll tell you the name because she worked at a comedy club, not a comedian, server. And we were, she went to one of the shows I was doing Comedians You Should Know, and a big, huge group of us went, out to the bars afterwards, as you do the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I probably shouldn't have, but I was in a good mood. I was seeing a lot of people I hadn't seen in like a year. And we were going into another bar, and the one door guy was like, yeah, I don't know about her. And I'm like, no, she's cool. Don't worry about it. And I kind of got her in. And I ran into people along the way that I hadn't seen. And they're like, Joe, I'm talking to them. And I went to the bathroom and I came back and she was like passed out on the bar, like had on the thing. And I'm like, ugh. And they were like, this guy's like kind of creeping. I'm like, well, I'll got her. I'm taking care of her. And I tried to like help her up, but it was too late. They'd already called the police. The police then the police, they were cool to their defense, because I was talking to them and stuff. And, luckily, I'm a good talker. But they had an ambulance already. And I don't think she was so bad where she needed an ambulance. Right. But she, excuse me. Yeah. Okay. Start choking up. But they gave her an ambulance. And I remember she was coming to, and she was like, they were already putting her in.
Yeah.
And she was like, no one could have just given me an Uber home and made sure I got in. This is going to cost me $3,000.
Yeah.
Or whatever an ambulance ride
exactly.
is. And that was her biggest concern, was that how much money it was going to cost. And I've heard stories of people who they're riding their bike or something, or they even got hit by a car, and they're like, no, I can walk this off, because they don't want an ambulance showing up when they probably do need an ambulance, because they don't want that insane bill. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff there that I like the idea of, but I definitely am a big fan of, there is a stigma with if a police officer has to go talk to someone after seeing something bad, the rest of the guys give them a hard time.
Yeah.
And then and you think about these poor kids in neighborhoods where there's a lot of shootings,
right?
And they just becomes a part of their daily life.
Yep.
So if we could go back to so you were in high school when your brother died.
No, I was
correct?
7. I was actually 4 years. So Mike disappeared.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my decades mixed up.
That's okay.
It was I was thinking 95, but 95 is when
I started doing comedy.
Executed.
Yes,
and that's when you started doing comedy.
Yeah. No, Mike was 16 years old, and he disappeared in 1976. And we got the phone call Christmas time in 1978. They had found his fishing license. It's one of those things where like Christmas was never the same. I wrote an essay recently. I'm trying to write a book about because when the story was going to come out in Chicago Magazine, I called a lot of my friends to make sure that they knew, so that they didn't feel like I'd hid something from them or didn't trust them with it. But I mean, it was pretty. I mean, they were like do you know Paul DiGilio? Paul is a comic. He's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I met him through. He did the show after your show, correct?
No, that's Nick.
Yeah.
Nick is a radio host.
Nick, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, but Nick DiGilio knew. Nick DiGilio knew, because I'd written a script kind of loosely based on our lives, and I had him read it, and he was really kind about it. But Paul DiGilio is a stand-up comic, and we've known each other for 25 years. And when I told him, I said, have I ever told you about Mike? And I felt so bad, because he was, it was having to give people this information about me, people who've been so supportive and kind to me, and they didn't know what to do with that. They this tragic story, and I could hear him going over the whole 25 years, trying to remember if he'd done an inappropriate joke and I'm like, no, I just want you to know, because I admire you, I love you, and I don't want you to think I kept this from you. So I did that for about 20 people I had to call. So I'm writing a book called I Have to Tell You About Mike. And we're thinking about doing a podcast, because I am actually friends with the detectives that were in the crawl space. I'm friends with prosecuting attorneys. One of the detectives that was working the open cases is an ex-boyfriend of mine. That's how crazy my life is. He called me about 10 years ago, and he said, hey, there's still some open cases, and the detectives have some questions for your mom, because my dad passed away in 2001. And so there's a lot there, because the story of a survivor's family is never told. It's always the what's the name of the podcast? My Favorite Murder, right?
My wife just got into that.
Yeah.
Which I know, I'm sure it's great. I heard it's a great podcast. But now she keeps being like, did you know this murder? And now every day I have to hear about murders. And I don't want to hear about anything that are, it's, as a parent, there's some stuff where it's like, hey, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah,
I just, please don't tell me this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry though. Go ahead.
No. So, but you were going to ask, so it was, Mike disappeared in 76. And so
basically I do think it's a great idea for a book, because you're right. You don't, even when I'm thinking of like movies and popular culture that are about serial killers and stuff like that, they cut to the victim's parents crying as they walk out of a courthouse, or they cut to the, it's never from their point of view. There might be some where it's like, we're still looking, we're keeping hope alive that they're alive. But yeah, I can't imagine. That's why I feel even weird kind of digging into it a little bit.
Well, but Joe,
it's like the fact that it's such a famous, because he came national. I mean, I think he was a clown. Did you guys know where he was?
Mike,
when he was found, he went fishing, right? Or,
no, they found Mike's fishing license, but no, Mike was. So my dad and my parents, we lived in Norwood Park. Mike lived with his mom and his stepdad in over by Wrigley, actually, right over on Addison, by where the Taco Bell was. Right, so like one of the Greystones, a couple doors in, and Mike was not happy with his stepdad. This is stuff I learned because the story came out. I actually got to learn much more about my brother's life than I have known my entire life, because my dad would never talk about it. My mom wasn't close to Mike, and
by the way, real shocking that your Irish father didn't want to talk about anything.
Oh, right.
That is like one of the most true stereotypes of all time. That is people with Irish blood, we just don't want to talk about anything serious, like at all. The number of times in my family where I've heard, "Oh, so-and-so surgery went well," and I'm like,
right.
I'm not going to give a name because I've got family listening to this podcast, but I didn't know they were sick. What the fuck are you talking about? Surgery? Like, I've got that number of times that's happened. It's just it would be mind-boggling to people who aren't from our stock. You know what I mean, Patti?
Well, and I also think that's what made me a comic, was it was easier to make fun of anything else than have to talk about the serious stuff. I think that's, I don't necessarily, while I talk about Declan, I also do it in a way that's not necessarily about how hard it is to raise a child with a disability. It's about how much everyone else is an asshole, how people stare at him and they say really stupid things. But with Mike's story, it was what was remarkable, and the biggest gift I got from actually running, because I had to share my story, it was that Mike's friends started reaching out to me, and the day after the story came out, one guy messaged me, goes, "I'm not being creepy. Please, if you'll do me a favor, call my friend John Scanlon." And I had talked to that guy before. This guy, Greg, I had messaged him because he left a beautiful message on Mike's digital gravesite. John Scanlon had been a fan of mine when I was on Bob and Tom's radio show for over 15 years. And he said he was falling asleep in his armchair and he heard my name and he heard Mike's name. He's like, "Patti, I couldn't sleep all night." He'd gone to grade school with Mike, and they had been best friends through high school. And what they said was they would always watch the documentaries and ask, why doesn't anyone tell Mike's story? And so I sort of had this opportunity to share a little bit about Mike and how he had strawberry blonde hair and freckles and, spectacular blue eyes.
Handsome to me. Sounds like a handsome guy.
Yeah, played baseball, was a great wrestler, and could fight, apparently. That was one of his friends telling me he was a fighter. So that was great.
He sounds like him and I would have hit it off very well.
Exactly.
Because I only wrestled for 1 year, but I was a good baseball player, and
there you go.
I've been known to get into some scrapes here and there.
But
I'm an adult now, so I don't fight anymore. Everyone.
Me neither.
That's not even true. I told a story about getting into a fight. Megan Gailey. I was the only guy at her bachelorette party.
Oh, nice.
I had to tell that story recently to some people people were asking me. She tweeted something about what's nice is that people like yourself and everyone else is pushing for, which is good as a society, we're pushing for people to be more open about their experiences. And Megan had a bad experience as a female comedian.
Yep.
As unfortunately so many female comedians do, that she told her story on Twitter, and I just commented like a heart emoji, let her know, hey, I always got your back. And then she commented, nobody's fought more people on my behalf than you. That's so nice. Then a lot of people were private messaging me going, "Who'd you fight?" And I'm like, well, which time? But the last time was at her bachelorette party, I was the only guy at a bachelorette party. And then they jokingly said that I should start my own business in which I am security for bachelorette parties.
Oh,
because it's not just Patti's. Here's the thing. It's not just about being muscle. It's not just about standing there looking tough so other dudes back away. Sometimes dudes would start to dance with one of her friends. And there were some friends I didn't know. And then her and Lisa Traeger would give me a look like, hey, because I'd be like on the other side of it's a group of like 25 women. And then I would go and like slide in between that dude and one of the girls that was part of the team. And they would look and be like, oh, I know this guy. He could pretend grind on me, which I wasn't really doing. I was just like doing that kind of dance move. Right. And that was the signal to the guy to be like, all right, back away.
So
she's spoken for.
You were throwing a pick.
Yeah, I was throwing a pick, right? You gotta stay strong. Let them bounce off the chest, right?
Yep.
Good fundamentals right there. So by the way, it's a great title for the book. I think that's amazing that you're doing that.
I would say this, and the race, what was epic about the race was not just that my name came out. In the article, I don't know if you remember, but I talk about how somebody showed me a business card with Gacy's name on it. It's actually Robert Martwick, our senator, showed me that card. His dad made John Wayne Gacy a precinct captain. So this was like, so the sort of this collision of my family's story and running for office, it took on another level. And it reminded me of how long this family has been in power and was very dedicated to maintaining that. So that's another thing that I plan on writing about as well. Isn't that crazy?
That is absolutely, that's insane. But I can't tell you how nice it is to see that smile that you get at the end of the sentence where you're like, because you have that look. You know how like Michael Jordan would get that the tongue would start to come out when he knew he was about to dunk on someone. Yeah. You're getting this little, like this nice little smile. It's like a cool little badass, like, oh, they have no idea.
Well,
you know what it reminds me of? Here's something for everybody. There's a scene in Happy Gilmore when he starts to go down a few strokes at the big, him versus Shooter McGavin at the end. And then he says, he comes out after he hits it, he goes, Shooter, the way I look at it, we've only just begun. And then like this cool, like music starts to play. I feel like you're looking at all the people who are trying to stop you from serving your community. And I really think that's what it's about. I don't think it's about ego with you at all, Patti, which unfortunately it is with a lot of politicians. I think you're kind of got this mindset now where it's like, oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. Mm-mm. I've only just begun. And I'm seeing you out there. And, activism is a big thing going on right now, which is great to see people in the streets. I know you were going live on your Facebook page from the BLM protest that happened. I guess a protest, would you call it a march? March. I'm going to call it a march, actually.
Yeah.
I guess it's a protest and a march. It's both, right?
Yeah. My husband was saying that he thinks that that's part of the language is very significant because when you call it a protest, the people in the community in our neighborhood, you know what it's like. A lot of folks here are very defensive and don't want to look on the other side of what it means to have injustice and inequality. So it's not as accessible to them. So I think a march, that march went right past the house I grew up in, the apartment I grew up in on Northwest Highway. And that's when I started crying when we were blocks away from Onahan because I had been bullied. Do you see the lights come on?
I did, and I actually no bullshit. I kind of wish they were on the entire time because it really brightened up everything behind you.
Turn the lights back on. My mom will come down here and she'll be like, "What are you doing?" While I'm doing like a podcast or something, and she's like, "Don't forget to turn off the lights."
That's great. No, I'm laughing. That happened at another one of these podcasts. That's actually one of the nice things is I kind of like doing the podcast this way in a sense. But I did one with this comedian Ryan Dalton, and at one point a light went on. And he's like, "Sorry about that." I'm like, "No, it looks awesome. Don't turn it off." I was saying before, you look like you're in a dungeon, man. Come on, let's brighten it up a little bit in there. But yeah, no, that's my own fault though. I need to start reminding people, hey, if you could be in the best lit room, that would help.
I know.
But you actually have a good light off the computer right now.
Well, I do this. I have a little.
See, I have a little lamp thing behind me. Yeah. But so everyone watching the podcast now, I did just order some stuff off of Amazon, which is also why I need this insurance money to come in, this unemployment insurance, because I could not afford what I just ordered. It actually wasn't too expensive, but I ordered like a little light ring thing.
I want one of those too. Yeah.
They're not that bad actually. I'm talking on my ass.
I actually have more lights here, but all you'll see is like stuffed animals and stuff. I don't know if that helps.
It doesn't hurt. It's not about the background, I don't think. But no, I didn't mean to cut you off for that. But it's I'm saying that I like that you were out there. I like that. Yeah, because look, what you mentioned with the Northwest Side, and we both love the Northwest Side of Chicago. There are parts of it though that there's some closed-mindedness that really kills me. Because, and there's like a complaining for the sake of complaining that sometimes I'm thinking to myself, do you not hear yourself a little bit there? And I went to a Chicago public grade school and then an all-guys Catholic high school. So I got to see how both sides work in a lot of ways. And there are stuff that I loved about going to a Catholic high school that I wish public schools would look at and be like, oh, we could implement that stuff here. Obviously, you can't do religious classes, and I'm not even advocating for that. But there was a sense of community that was instilled that, when you have like a sense of pride in your school, I think you care more as a student overall. And I think the public school, I think Taft's done a good job with that lately, actually. Funny enough, Principal of Taft was a high school teacher of mine at the Catholic high school. Yes. So I think he did take actually some and instill it over at Taft, which is a really smart move. So anyhow, in Taft High School, everyone listening, was the movie Grease is based off of Taft High School. Yeah. And Jerry Krause went there, who was the Bulls GM in The Last Dance that you saw, the one that everyone hated, although some people did later give him credit, which they should have. I mean, he did take a big part of that, but he did ruin it at the end. Anyway, it's a whole nother podcast talking about the Bulls Last Dance documentary. Is that there is a level of closed-mindedness that I feel like it's a lot of people. I mean, and it stayed through into our 20s. When I started doing stand-up comedy, it changed me in a lot of ways because I got to meet a lot of people that weren't from Chicago. Right. You know, like everyone, a lot of the comedians that we know will always be like, oh, Joe's so Chicago. No one ever said I was so Chicago growing up because everybody was so Chicago. Exactly. That wasn't a thing, and so I changed. If I had never gone into that world, I probably would have this, closed-mindedness too, where you think it's a us versus them thing. Right. Which that quality could be good for loyalty. Like some of the most loyal people I've ever met in my life are Northwest Siders. These people will take a bullet from you. But because of that, anything that's a little bit different than they're used to, they're suspect of. And I wish they would drop that suspicion and just be a little bit open to new ideas and new other things. Like they're like that development on Northwest Highway, they're going to build this big building. And I think of like 100 units, 20 of them were going to be to help poorer people. Right. And immediately they were like, that's going to kill property value. And I go, how do you know? Look up. How did it work in other areas? They did in other areas and it didn't hurt property value. It actually helped. So I don't understand. Like there's just stuff like that where they're just suspicious of everyone around them for reasons I still can't figure out to this day.
Well, what the other part of that is that the threshold for qualifying for those apartments, almost half of the people in this community would qualify for it. It's not just the extremely, they're worried about people coming from other neighborhoods. I mean, and we say that there were people who said it was going to be Cabrini Green. So they bring in race. There were people who were worried about the density and about crowding and things like that. But it doesn't help that the loudest voices were saying, we don't want Black people in this community. And we don't want thugs. We don't want drug dealers. And that was what, and the people that were kind of fueling that, it got away from everybody. But on the other side, I think that there was also a dismissive-ness and not a space for people to express their concerns in a way that was productive either. There was a meeting held at a church that my mom and I couldn't even get in. She was battling breast cancer, was in a wheelchair at the time, and we couldn't get into the church because it was packed. And I feel like that was done very strategically in order to blow it up and sort of amplify the ones that were negative and racist rather than the people who really wanted to have a conversation. I will say this, Joe. What I've learned is that there are a lot of people who are they're like wrestling, like pro wrestlers. They lean into the face and the bad guy. They're these characters that just they really like playing this role, and I think it distorts what really needs to be done in order to help people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I like that you said willing to have the conversation. I think that's what I meant before, where they hear a thing and on the surface they go, "That sounds like projects. I know projects are bad." Because I've been told my whole life projects are bad in Cabrini Green, and there's a lot of projects that were horrible and they were failures by every sense of the word. And then they're just so quickly to write off any other type of aid to help anyone. And again, they don't want the conversation. There's some people that didn't want the conversation, and there's some people who do. And for those people, it's like, yeah, let's talk, let's figure it out. Because I'm one of those people that, and again, I think maybe that's like the comedian brain that a lot of us have, where when we hear something. Whenever I hear immediately anyone loves something or hates it, it's contrarian, I guess, part of me. Right. Where I'm like, well, let's look at the opposite viewpoint. Yeah. Let's look into the opposite, because there's no way I know the world isn't black and white. It's gray as hell. Right. And anything that just seems like the simple solution, whenever I hear people go, why don't they just do this? It's like, you don't think anyone ran that idea by them? Like, I remember back when people cared about the deficit. No one gives a shit about that. They only cared about that when Obama was president. I haven't heard the word deficit since Trump took office. But I'll never forget this bullshit statement. If I have to balance my checkbook, what does it the government have to balance theirs, huh? Makes sense to me. Well, it's because you're an idiot, okay? Right. You are not a government. You're a dickhead who doesn't get math. All right. Sorry, I'm getting a little, it just irks the hell out of me.
Yep.
Okay. I don't understand how one individual could compare themselves, one individual with their nice little life. Sure. I'm sure they got a nice solid life, 60 grand a year,
Right.
have, they go to Wisconsin every summer. I'm sure I'm not knocking that living or that existence, but for you to compare yourself to the finances, the economy, the biggest economy in the history of humanity, and think, why can't one do that's
Right.
just so incredibly stupid, and just because it's an easy thing. And the people want those people. Like, there are certain politicians who throw that out there. They know that's not a thing, but they know it's an easy thing that the average person could then bitch about while they're in line at Jewel. It's a grocery store, everyone. And they could regurgitate it to sound smart.
Yeah.
Why can't I'm careful with local references, because every now and then someone will be like, what the hell is that? Or I have a comedian on saying, oh, dude, we were at this bar. I'm like, no one knows that bar. Just explain it a little bit. Because they'll be like, oh, we all know that bar, right, Joe? I'm like, no, I know that bar's full of scumbags, but now I have to take an extra sentence to explain. Because I have only half my listeners are based in Chicago. Maybe 60%, I'd say, are Chicago. Well, I got some in the UK, Ireland.
There you go.
Australia.
We gave them a little Northwest side taste.
No, I think that's just a local politics. I think it's more relatable. I knew we were going super local, but I wanted people to understand what it's like to, I could watch a movie about Boston and not have to be from Boston to get what's happening. So if you're listening and you're like, I'm not from Chicago, I don't know what they're saying, follow along, sleep at night. You know what I mean? Come on. And
it was weird. Like there were people that we knew that were following us too. Like they would, to track where we had trackers. And it was surreal. And it was some of it was the kind of stuff that you see in the movies, but and I will say this. So let's talk about hyper local with that 5150, the building that you're talking about. My thing, I supported it until I saw how ugly it was getting and I'm glad that it's happening. Let me say that right out the gate. I'm glad that we are giving an opportunity for people to live in a community that is wonderful. And we have choked off opportunities for so many other neighborhoods for a long time.
Yeah, it's a safe. If I could, I'm going to cut you off, but I do want to emphasize, because I didn't emphasize it before. And I think the listeners would get a kick out of this part. Yeah, yes. The Northwest Side is a very safe area.
Yeah.
And I know there are people on these different Facebook watch groups or whatever that every time a 16-year-old steals something out of a car, they act like everything's going to hell. I got to move to Huffman Estates now. Everything's so terrible now. That's exactly how they sound, by the way. What I just did was a dead-on impression of these people.
I could hear it. I felt it.
You felt it, right?
Yeah.
It's a very safe neighborhood. And so anyone who would be applying to live with, government assistance to live in this part of the city would be doing it because they want to leave a bad situation.
Right.
And if you're against it, then I think there is some true racism there. And also they're worried about them bringing the crime. I remember that you talked about that meeting. I was living in LA at the time, but it was being live streamed on Facebook.
Yeah.
I caught about 3 minutes of it. And at one point, a woman said, all right, fine. Maybe they're safe, but we know the cousin's hanging out over there won't be. And I'm like, how do you say something like that and not know it's a racist thing to say, right? Because there's an assumption that all poor people are criminals, which is not true, right? Do poor people tend to commit crimes more so? Yes, they're poor. That's how that works. When you're rich, you don't knock off a 7-Eleven. Duh.
They break laws in other ways. We know that.
Oh yeah, white collar crime. Exactly. Yeah, some 22-year-old who doesn't have a job might, steal some stuff out of your car or might break in or something like that, which is bad. They usually do it when you're not home, though. That's typically the move. One time, growing up in Portage Park, someone did break into our house. They got nothing because I was coming in through the back door and I saw a shadow go by real quick. I thought it was my older sister going to hide and jump out.
Whoa.
But then I noticed that the door was open a little bit and there was a shovel. And I'm like, this isn't our shovel. And I remember calling my dad at work and he was like, all right, well, check this area. So then I found out where my dad hid some stuff. And I'm like, no, it's all there. And he's like, okay. And I go, he goes, you must have scared him off. What they were doing was they were going door to door with a shovel. That way, if someone did answer, they could be like, hey, can I shovel your walkway for $10 or something? And when no one was answering, they'd probably check the thing and then sneak in and steal. Anyway, they'll steal your Blu-ray player. White collar people will steal your fucking pension. Yes. They will steal your retirement. That's so what is worse? Yeah. Anyway, though, but I wanted to add this part. But the 5150 is the address. That's what Patti was referring to. And I was talking about the building. The building, And I understand. I agreed. I was talking to some people, and yeah, it's a monstrosity of a building. They couldn't agree on the size, and I understood there needed to be some compromise. So I got where there was some arguments going on. I totally got that. But when it comes to the safety aspect, what kills me is it's being built directly across the street from a very big police station.
Yeah.
Directly. Like you couldn't, I don't understand how they're worried about crime. To me, that's almost like if I were a police officer working in that district at that station, I'd be like, do you think I suck at my job? Why are you guys thinking we can't keep our own streets safe?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you couldn't keep the street directly in front of you safe. That would say something to me. More than likely, it's 2 blocks from the blue line. The people living there wouldn't be owning a car because it wouldn't make sense. They'd want to walk the 2 blocks to the blue line. Probably couldn't afford a car, most likely, if they were going for the lower end stuff. So the traffic claim is BS too. And they act like that big hanging out. It's not. It's a building along train tracks next to a highway across from a police station. Even if they were worried about the criminal gang element being brought up, gangbangers typically don't like hanging around across the street from police stations. They don't.
Exactly. No.
And there's not even an alley over there. I don't understand. It's just, I'm sorry, Patty, go ahead though. You had a whole thing about
No. I agree. And then it becomes, why don't we put it here? Why don't we put it there? It's going to go somewhere. We have to do something to alleviate clearly a disparity of access to affordable living. And if we don't do it, has to, and some people are going to feel like it was shoved down their throats, and that's unfortunate. And I wish that we could give some space. And again, it goes back to, I believe the way it was done was too severe. But at some point you have to, you see what, so we also have a development in Portage Park over at the Six Corners. And so finally there's going to be, that's been vacant. We have huge stretches of empty storefronts. Something has to happen.
That was the second biggest shopping district in the city of Chicago at one point, Six Corners.
Yeah.
And it frustrates me as someone who grew up and hung out at Six Corners. Like that's a big part of my childhood. That when I started doing stand-up comedy and I'd meet Chicago transplants and they would ask me where I was from, I would often just say Six Corners and they would go, "Oh, I live right there too." And I'm like, "Really? You live off of Irving, Milwaukee, and Cicero?" They go, "No, Milwaukee, North, and Damon." I'm like, "That's not Six Corners.
That's not Six Corners."
And to even prove it, this is too Chicago, I guess, for some people. If you type in just the word Six and Corners into Google, just don't even have to write Chicago, just Six Corners and hit enter, the real Six Corners, our Six Corners pops up. So I tell people that's these Six Corners. Now the argument can be made, there's nothing going on over there anymore. So maybe there's a new Six Corners, and I can't argue with that, but it upsets me that there isn't stuff going on because people tried to do some stuff there, and there was a lot of political crap going on. And what are they still doing that plan of having like the most expensive retirement home ever?
That just got approved.
Which, by the way,
I know
that should get de-approved because with the pandemic, how many people are rushing to send older relatives into an expensive nursing home with a virus going on that's just wiping these people out?
$7,000 a month on some of those units.
$7,000 a month, really?
Yeah, between 4 and 7,000. Yeah.
This is just like that's the stuff that makes me want to run. It actually is. That makes me want to run for like alderman and things like that. Because I look at that going, if you can afford $7,000 a month, you're not choosing Six Corners. You're just not.
And what they do is they take the individual's entire life savings. So let's say somebody sold their house for $300,000 or $400,000. It's turned over to that facility, and once that runs out, there's no safety measure in place to make sure that they have somewhere else to go. They're just expelled from the unit.
So they're just preying on old people.
At least that was the previous agreement. I don't know if that's changed with the final. Yeah, but that was a city thing. I wasn't gonna.
Well, I remember there was talks of an AMC movie theater. Yeah,
that would have been cool. I think that would have been a good idea. An ArcLight. That
would have been a great idea. Because I think of that Regal over on Western and the bunch of bars and restaurants around it do very well. If there was an AMC over there, people would go to a restaurant like Community and then walk over to the movie.
Exactly.
Or to have the movie and then walk over after. And then you could pop up a couple other more bars and restaurants over there. It should be a nightlife district.
Yes.
You know?
I agree. Yeah.
I hear people say like, no, we want more retail. The people who are in charge of these things, I swear to God, have no idea what's going on in the world. Retail, everyone, is dead. And it's been dying before COVID-19 hit. Yeah. That's why I was a fan of Andrew Yang, because he was giving out statistics where it's like, hey, 30% of malls are going to close within a decade.
Yeah.
Because there's a thing called Amazon, and more online shopping is happening these days. And it was happening beforehand anyway. So I don't understand, like, what is someone going to do? If you want to open a small business, why would you want to open like retail?
Yeah. No.
Unless it's like a specific thing that you think people would want to shop for. But even specific things are hard to do.
Yep.
You know, like if you want, like I want to get an arm. So I'm holding the microphone, everyone. I ordered it, but that's a thing that I don't know what store I'd go to. Guitar Center. You know, one of those arms to hold the mic.
Exactly.
That's the only one, and they're not close or convenient. They're mostly a suburban thing. There's one in the city, and so what else am I going to do but order online?
Yep,
that's just the way that's going. It's sad. It's sad but true. So you're going to have more empty storefronts going forward, but people still like to go out. Unfortunately, the pandemic is kind of hurting that. But I know we're eventually going to get back to it. Hopefully, I know there's probably going to be a second wave soon, but a year from now, people will be eating and drinking and going to a play. I know you did a show at that theater over there a couple of years ago. Yeah, the Gift Theater. And there's no one on closer to Six Corners. I thought the Gift was over.
I'm sorry, you're right. Not the Gift. I did it at the Filament. Yep. The Filament.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
The Filament. So you need some more stuff like that.
And we're missing our Irish Fest this summer. That would have been, I know, I'm sorry. It would have been
I wish they could have done it.
Yeah.
It would have been next week. It's always the weekend after the 4th of July. I love that fest so much.
I wanted to reach out to them and like suggest we could have done like a comedy thing for them, or it would have been fun to do a virtual.
Maybe
they could have done music, and I mean I don't know. I can't speak for other people, but
I'll talk to them. That's a good idea. I'll let you know. I'll hit them up.
I would do that.
Bob McNamara about that. That's a good idea. Can I hold you? I know I've been taking a lot of your time now. Can I get you for another 5 minutes?
Yeah.
I want to end on a fun thing.
Okay.
I've been usually keeping this for bonus, but since we got really serious, I think I'll keep it as part of the regular podcast.
Okay.
We shall see everybody. Okay, here we go. Yes. I have a question. Oh, where'd it go? I just had the stupid thing up. It's a fun thing I was doing where. Oh, here we go. Sorry. It's called Favorites.
Okay.
The podcast is kind of like, I was called Kilgallon's Pub for a while. Now I'm just calling it the Joe Kilgallon Podcast because it was confusion. But the idea was bar conversation, types of conversation you have in a pub, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to, what is your favorite shot of alcohol?
Oh, yeah. I would say a shot of JMO.
Okay. So if you could only do one shot,
for the rest of my life.
Jameson.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm also Jameson, so I'm a big fan of you there. Favorite beer? You can only drink one beer the rest of your life. What's it going to be?
It's so funny. Well, this is tough because is it going to be another Irish one? Is it going to be a Guinness or a Modelo? It's going to be a Guinness.
Also, Guinness. I like that too. I don't know. To me, I'm split because if it's summer, I'm a Miller Lite guy. I think I just grew up on that cheap American beer. And some people hate the taste. I like it. I like a cold Miller Lite on a hot day. I also like a good Magners though.
Yeah.
And my winter drink is Guinness.
Yeah.
Winter and fall, I love Guinness. And then Stella. I'm a Stella fan too.
I would do here. I can split it up this way: winter Guinness, summer Tecate. I love Tecate.
I like Tecate too.
It's good.
Mexican beers are great. Sol, ever have Sol? I guess. I think it is.
Pacifica's
very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite cocktail, mixed drink, and also, you're a politician now, so this you're going to lose votes on some of these. I'm telling you. Wouldn't it be hilarious if someone's like, "I caught you on Kilgallon's podcast, Tecate"? Come on,
right?
You don't like Modelo? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Not voting for you. All right, go ahead.
I have to tell you, this is actually a neighborhood one because I do like old fashions, but I will say the Sazerac at the Gale Street Inn is one of my favorite cocktails. That's really good.
Gale Street Inn, everybody. If you're ever in Chicago, I think that's the best ribs.
Oh.
Some of the best ribs. It's definitely my top 2 or 3 for ribs, and it's a great restaurant overall. They've got really good food, and I've always liked the people who work there. All right, favorite drunk food?
Oh, burrito for sure.
Yeah, that's a pretty. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
For a while, I was French toast for me. I'd go to that. Remember that diner? It used to be called Mr. G's.
Oh yeah.
Right on like Lawrence and Austin, like where Gunnison and Lawrence meet or whatever. I would get like some French toast after like a really good show.
Yeah.
I remember having like my final show before moving to LA. That I think I got a standing ovation just because it was my final show. But I was also very much on that night and feeling amazing. And I was out with people for a while. And then I was there eating French toast, still riding that high and looking. I was eating at the counter, and everyone else at the counter just look. You don't really get the highest class of people at 4 a.m. at a diner like that. But just thinking to myself, they have no idea what I did tonight.
Yeah,
and I kind of like that. It kind of brings you down a little bit. It's nice. All right, so burrito. That's your drunk food.
Yep.
From any place in particular?
Look, you talk about the Burrito King. You may as well go.
TBK.
Yeah,
We're talking
TBK.
junk food now.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the last one. And this one's tough. You could take a little bit of time on this one.
All right.
If you could drink with any historical person, they have to be dead.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's historical in my book. I guess you could be living in historical, but any historical person.
Yeah.
You could do one woman, one man, or just choose one. Doesn't matter. I try to keep it open.
Okay. Well, I don't know that. I don't think Lincoln actually drank, but I would, that's a person I would love to talk to. And then I think actually Jane Addams, I would love to talk to about Chicago history and starting social work in Chicago.
Jane Addams. Yeah, that's a good one. Ask her why, if she was alive, would she be happy that they named the Jane Addams interchange after her? Or the highways, the worst part of traffic is the Jane Addams.
Yeah.
It's like the Jane Addams become the James Adams Tollway, I think, even at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Jane Addams is
90.
Famous. Yeah, 90. Famous in Illinois. But you always hear the Jane Addams interchange. Well, that's where I'm going to be stuck for way longer than I should be. I hear Jane Addams and I get mad thinking about her name. Well, I associate her.
So she had a lifelong partner, and so I was just listening to an interview. Adam Selzer, who does the cemetery tours, was doing one for Pride, and apparently her lifelong partner was asked, "Were you lesbians?" And she said, "Were we companions? Yes. Were we, the definition of lesbian now? No." So I'm curious about that. That sort of apparently was called a Boston marriage. Two women who enjoyed each other's company, but maybe not necessarily physically. The whole thing is fascinating. And then on top of it, what they created, and what they created in Chicago is quite remarkable.
Why does it sound sadder that they didn't have a romantic relationship?
Well, they might have.
That's sadder. I would hope they did.
I hope so.
If I heard about two friends, hey, we love each other's company. We're just really good friends, and this is kind of our thing.
And we share a bed.
Yeah. Come on. Maybe turn the lights off. Feel around a little bit consensually.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're adults here. All right. Good choices. Good choices on that one.
Good.
I like that. You had some good ones there. Patti, if you gotta come back on once you finish that book.
Okay. I would love to. Thank you.
All right. Patti, thank you so much. Tell people where they could, I know. Hold on. I did this earlier. I meant to have you, hold on. Look at this little feature here. Look at that.
Ooh, there it is. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter, Patti Vasquez, CHI.
Perfect. Everyone follow Patti Vasquez on Twitter, and then I'll keep people up to date when they can start donating some money, because Patti's one of the good ones.
That's the
and
part
good
I
ones.
hate
I mean politicians. Politicians.
Yeah.
You got to be careful how you say one of the good ones. I mean politicians.
I know what you mean.
I mean female comedians. No, I'm kidding.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a whole other episode.
I just got canceled. Yeah, we could have another one where we talk about comedy and stuff like that. I had a great time talking to you, Patti. As always.
Joe.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Joe Kilgallon podcast. Now, Patti, I'm going to end it here, but I could talk to you once it's over, because I want to tell you the name of the person who got alcohol poisoning, because I'm sure you're wondering.